So we have an energetic field around us, and we only use about 10% of our brains currently. We don't see everything that's going on in the field because only 10% of our brain is getting used. We're not seeing everything. Our eyes aren't fully optimized, right? Because the brain, our heart actually has an electromagnetic field. Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about it. So we're always sending out energy, right? It's why you notice if something good happens in the morning, the rest of the day is like amazing. Or if one bad thing happens in the morning, everything bad goes because you get onto a vibration, onto a frequency, and then everything follows suit.
Have you ever wondered about energy healing and how you can use that modality to optimize your performance, your wellness, and your health? Well, on today's episode of the FeelWell podcast, we are going to be talking about this very exciting topic of energy work and energy healing. And I have a very special guest today, Nicole Thaw. She is a seasoned breathwork facilitator, a certified meditation teacher, a Reiki practitioner. She's also skilled in Theta healing, level 2 spinal energetics facilitator, and trained by the one and only Dr. Sarah Jane. And she is also a facilitator in EMDR and life force activation. So she is going to explore this topic with us. She is very well versed in it. And the first thing I want to find out from her is, how did you get to this particular scope of practice? You actually have a background in business administration. You have a master's in business administration and a master's in education, which is the other side of the spectrum. So how did you end up? What was your journey that got you to this style of practice?
So I was actually a medical sales rep, which is so interesting because now my thought process on the pharmaceutical industry has so changed. But basically, I was just so sick. I got so sick with autoimmune. That was a really, really big part of my journey. It got so bad that I was in so much constant pain that I was just like, I can't live like this anymore. And I was always constantly kind of feeling empty. So I was living in Miami Beach and I would go out all the time and everybody around me seemed like they were having so much fun and they would be drinking and they'd be partying. And I would just sit there having massive amounts of anxiety. And at that point in my life, I would always hide from the anxiety. So I would hide behind the anxiety using a relationship. And so one day, about 7 years ago, I got really, really sick. And my life, basically, for my version, I hit rock bottom. But instead, thankfully, instead of turning to drugs or alcohol, I turned to spirituality. And I was just feeling so lost, so lonely, so defeated, so unhappy that I was like, I need something. And so I started seeing all of these healers. I started doing all these classes, all these workshops, all of these retreats. And I started working on myself, a lot of plant medicine as well. And I started realizing that we just really weren't living. We were so ingrained into us from school or our parents or religion or our community or culture, whatever it is, to be living our life this way. But I realized you don't have to live your life this way. So by starting to really heal myself, all of a sudden I started to do these trainings where I started to help other people. It was never really my plan. I made a lot of money doing medical sales. I never was like, yeah, I want to leave medical sales and become an energy practitioner, but it just really fell into my lap. So by healing myself, and I'm always still on the journey, I started to work with other people. And because I went through so much along the way, I'm able to hold space and understand what so many people are going through. And then I went through a relationship with somebody with very severe mental health and addiction. And that really, really transformed me as a practitioner because I was so profoundly changed by the amount of suffering that I see in our world, in America. And so that really just transformed me and has allowed me to help a lot more people. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that a lot of people that are actually practicing and working professionally in their purpose have gone through a level of quote unquote hitting rock bottom.
Yeah.
It's about using your suffering to kind of guide you and direct you into what your purpose and your alignment with that purpose should be, right? So,
absolutely.
And as you went through that journey, and I think your start of your journey was basically to self-heal, but you discovered a way to heal other people through that because it works so profoundly for yourself.
Yep.
And what you saw with your,
wisdom.
yes,
Yep.
your pain became your purpose.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so amazing to do that. And then you basically unraveled another layer through your relationship and seeing how other people are suffering and how what you learned could carry over into helping those people.
Absolutely.
But I think in this world of healing, doing your own healing is definitely important because we have to hold space for other people, right? And know how to do that. So can you explain what energy healing means to you? You have a lot of different certifications and I've worked with you. So I understand that how you actually blend different energy modalities together. Mm-hmm. Can you explain how, just like a general explanation of how energy work is done, but also kind of elaborate on your particular modalities?
Absolutely. So a lot of people will look at this stuff like it's woo-woo, it's fake, it's not real, or it's demonic. But if you really think about it, we're made up of energy. Everything is energy. We have an energy field around us. And then our body is constantly storing trauma, right? So a lot of people don't realize that yes, the mind stores, but the body stores the trauma as well. And it takes much longer for the body to process trauma than the mind. So the body part has really been neglected for some reason. The last 10, 15 years, it's become much more common to see a therapist, to work on mental health. Now, a lot of companies will pay for mental health and it's acceptable, but it hasn't really yet hit mainstream, the body therapy part of it.
That we're actually one whole being made up of a lot of different parts that create a wholeness of us. In our particular culture, we're very siloed in our practices and our medical practices. But I think we're moving back towards that shift of that whole being. So,
absolutely.
And the energy system is a huge component of that.
Yeah. So we have an energetic field around us. And we only use about 10% of our brains currently. So we don't see everything that's going on in the field, because only 10% of our brain is getting used. We're not seeing everything. Our eyes aren't fully optimized, right? Because the brain. So we're not seeing this energetic field that's around us, but our heart actually has an electromagnetic field of I don't know if it's 10 feet or something. Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about it. So we're always sending out energy, right? It's why you notice if something good happens in the morning, the rest of the day is amazing. Or if one bad thing happens in the morning, everything bad goes because you get onto a vibration, onto a frequency, and then everything follows suit. So what I'm doing when I'm working on the body, I am mixing a lot of different modalities. I'm always constantly doing new trainings. I need to stop. It's getting a little ridiculous. But how I change each session based on the person. But as somebody who, I'm a New Yorker, I was very, very much in my mind. So when I would go to see a facilitator and they would say, okay, lay down and surrender, I would look at them and I would be like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean surrender? So I created a session that is for somebody who basically can't meditate, that can't get out of their heads. And I get you out of your head and into your feeling body, because people are so, not everybody, but a lot of people are so disconnected from their body. A lot of times it's just a safety mechanism. The body shuts down. People either oscillate between overdoing and not being able to be alone or sit with themselves because they don't want to sit in their trauma, or they go to the other end where they're just sitting in bed and they're just exhausted and they can't get out of bed. And so that's because the nervous system is just completely in overdrive, especially we were just talking about this. We live in this culture of just always doing, always making money. If you're not doing something, you're lazy. And that's just so backwards because there's so much growth in doing nothing. So what we do in the sessions is we normally begin with a lot of breath work just to get you, not a lot, a little bit of breath work, just to get you out of your head and into your body, just to slow the mind down. And then I mix something called Network Chiro Spinal Energetics, which is energy chiropractor work, working on the energetic field as well as the nervous system to release. And then I mix a bunch of other different modalities into it. But basically, we're allowing you to connect with yourself, to begin to shift that nervous system, to allow the body the safety to finally feel everything you've been repressing, to release that.
Mm-hmm. So the nervous system is a huge component of how it basically drives us all the way from a spiritual level to a cellular level. And the part of the nervous system that we're addressing, I work with it as well in my field. I'm a little bit different type of clinician. I'm a physical therapist, so I explore the nervous system and how it stores things and how it activates at a cellular level, tissue tension and inflammatory process. But I use different modalities. You're using tapping into it through energy, but the principle behind it is that the nervous system has wired itself to be in these chronic states of what people would typically recognize as like fight or flight or a freeze response. And that's your survival responses, basically. And because we're living in this chronic state of stress and on the go with no recovery built in, we are never balancing our nervous systems back out. We're just staying on that high revving mode all the time. So that's, super interesting as far as like, even if you haven't in particularly gone through a specific trauma that you can attach to, just those loads of stress all the time are getting wired into your system. So the energy work that you're doing is pulling people out of that fight or flight or freeze response and into like a more neutral, safe zone. Yes. We're turning the signal of safety back on into the body. What do you see in people that are coming in those chronic states of survival so that people can understand like, okay, am I that person? In my opinion, 99% of the people that I see are in chronic states of stress, fight or flight, some sort of trauma response, and they don't even know it. What do you see when people present to you?
Yeah, most people are, and they have no idea, or they think, oh, I don't have any trauma. But even just the act of being born is traumatic. You come out of the womb, and normally babies are crying because it's so traumatizing to come out. Or trauma could be like when you're in second grade and some of the other girls are teasing you and don't invite you to a sleepover. I mean, that gets imprinted and stored in your subconscious, and you create your entire reality based off the belief that maybe nobody likes me. So then you'll see later on in life, you really struggle to form relationships with girlfriends. So what I see, it's interesting. Everybody really has a different experience. I always say that if somebody comes in with the mindset that this isn't going to work and they won't surrender, there's not much I can do because we're working together. Spinal Energetics, it's not something I do to you. We're working together to open up the nervous system. Yes, I'm working on the energetic layer, but I'm also hitting areas in your major spine, access points, organs, as well, meridians. So there is some, it's Eastern and Western mixed together. What I find, it's interesting. So I'll have a lot of men come to me and they'll be referred and they have no idea what they're getting themselves into, or they're pretty skeptical and think I'm like, some super granola girl. And oftentimes the men will have extremely physical responses where their entire body is shaking. And the reason that I think men have very physical responses is that men in our society have not really been raised to know that it's okay to vocalize their feelings. And it's really important to cry. It's an energetic release. It releases it from the nervous system. So men are so pent up being like, okay, I have to work. I have to power through. Like boys don't cry, that they're holding on to so much stress in their body that all of a sudden their body reaches the state of like homeostasis where they're able to just drop in. And all of a sudden their body starts to shake uncontrollably. And sometimes people will see the videos and they're like, is that an exorcism? Is it demonic? And there's actually beginning to be a lot of studies. There's someone named Dr. Peter Levine. A lot of people have been reading The Body Keeps the Score, which it's a little bit of a tough read to get through, but it's very good. It's very informative. And Dr. Peter Levine talks about how animals shake trauma from their nervous system to reset the nervous system. And at the end of the day, we're animals. We are animals.
That part of the nervous, that survival response is an animalistic, primal, reflexive response, and it's there for a reason, right? But because we're so smart, we like to override that animalistic response and prevent that entire cycle from happening inside of our bodies. So you actually are going in and tapping in and finishing that cycle of response for them. So that tremoring or that shaking that they're having is what? It's the energy.
It's the energy releasing all the trauma. Finally leaving. And then when it's done, normally they feel pretty exhausted. But the next day they're like, wow, I feel really good, because most of these men aren't even in their bodies. And then with women, it's interesting. Women are a little bit a lot of women actually start to cough. It's very interesting because what I've seen is that a lot of women have been raised to be the good girls, to say the right thing, to be liked, to be a lady. And so where men are a little bit more vocal, like they kind of share their opinion and it's more acceptable in our society, women kind of hold it in. And so women begin to cough because their throat chakra begins to open. And I've actually had clients lose their voice for a day or two or get really froggy because the throat chakra is beginning to open. And then they find that the first few days, they'll have a little bit of word vomit, which eventually evens out. But all of a sudden, that energy center begins to open and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want that. No, that doesn't work for me. No, I don't like that. All of that starts to come up. I do see a lot of clients have a big emotional releases, crying, hysterically laughing, screaming. And then there's the movement, which can look a little strange from, videos, but it's that the body is finally starting to release the held pent up trauma and it's feeling safe in that moment that it finally can release. And the shaking actually feels really, really good. It kind of almost has it can even have like a sexual feeling to it because it's just energy moving through your whole body and finally letting go.
Well, part of it too is like, yes, we're releasing stored energy that's not serving us essentially. It's like stagnant, keeping us stuck, not making us feel very good. But also we're revitalizing
Absolutely. Yeah.
energy flow. So you're awake, you start to feel as kind of like an awakening too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You begin to pull back the layers of what's been programmed into you to be, and you start to really become who you authentically are before certain beliefs were ingrained in you before the trauma. And this is a process. Obviously, I always tell people this. I'm like, you don't go to one Pilates class and wonder why you don't have abs like the teacher, right? You have to stick with it. You have to keep doing the work. And we were just talking about this too, how we're like onions pulling the layers back. So you get to one layer and then you reach another layer and then you reach another layer. So we're constantly going deeper and deeper into the sessions where sometimes the first couple sessions, people have so much body armor. They've lived in such a long state of fight or flight that it's hard for them to drop into the body. They don't know what that means. It's almost painful for them to lay down and not have a distraction.
Yeah, we're actually trained at a very young age to detach from our bodies. Just the way our systems are set up. Like, for example, children are supposed to explore and move and play and express. And children typically express through actions versus verbalizing their expressions of what they're feeling, et cetera. Because they just don't have that concept yet. But what we're putting children into schools and we're saying, sit at the desk, be quiet, basically detach from all of those natural instinctual feelings and those natural movements and actions, and be quiet and listen. And all of you stay in the same position. Don't disrupt, those kind of things. And, that has its purpose to an extent. But because we start doing that at such a young age, children are really kind of detaching from their bodies and their feelings and their needs. You only know your needs by base of what the story that your body is telling you, right? So if we can't even access that, then how are we supposed to do anything with that? So we have a lot of detached minds from bodies from a very young age. Just we're teaching that. But then also when you have a history where you have a traumatic or a stressful experience as a child, to naturally protect yourself, you start to leave your body a little bit. You start to dissociate from your body because it feels so yucky to be in your body because you don't know what to do because you're a child. So those experiences start to detach us too. So getting back into your body is one of the first steps to being able to access what we need to even process.
Absolutely.
Because our body is going to tell us everything. Our mind is only receiving a story. And if you're detached from your body, your mind is actually just making up a story at that point because it doesn't even have anything to connect to tell you a real, actual story of what's going on there. So one of the biggest things is getting back into the body. And when you do this type of work, like you said, you start off meeting the person where they're at. So if they're super armored, meaning they're basically out of their body. They're protecting themselves by being out of their body. You are just setting the stage to start to pull them back into the body based off of what they're ready to do. And you're using your different blend of modalities to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's incredible how many people are disassociated. And I can normally tell when somebody can't connect and they can't get out of their head or they can't get into their body and the session's really challenging for them. That normally means that there's a larger amount of childhood trauma.
It could be childhood. Yeah. And like when we talk about trauma, it can mean so many different things. And you can describe it as chronic stress too.
Yeah.
Just always going, never recovering can also put your body into that similar type of state. If you were a child that had chronic illness, if you were a young adult that had chronic illness, things like that can also put you into that state. Anything where your body didn't really like have a pleasant experience, but didn't know what to do with it, you start to dissociate and leave your body. So it's like very, very important to first create that safety back into the body, and then you can reconnect with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the schools really should, because it's no one's fault, right? You're never taught that as a child for the most part. So the schools really should be focusing on tapping, I believe, mindfulness, meditation, sharing how you're feeling in the moment. If you need to move energy, more time outside, children are meant to grow up and play. So there's so many people that are just completely disassociated because we are not taught how to self-regulate. If you have a temper tantrum, normally what the teacher or the parent does is they stick you in a corner for time out, but you're not sitting. But the correct response would be to sit down with the child. Okay, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling?
Also,
I'm
here with you.
I'm here.
No one's leaving you because you're having feelings that aren't pleasant.
Right.
Because those are healthy feelings, right? Being angry, having frustration, and we're never taught how to deal with those feelings in a healthy way. Yeah. We are taught to stop crying, be quiet, because usually it's dysregulating the adult.
Right.
So it's unpleasant for everyone. So instead of actually processing it,
it's stuffed down.
We're stuffing it in. Yeah. We're stuffing it down. Yeah. So
if it's been stuffed down for 30 or 40 years, it might take a little bit of time to unstuff, or you could have an extreme physical reaction like a lot of these men are having because it's just wanted to come out. Your nervous system has wanted to release it for so long and it's been so trapped that when your body finally has a chance to drop into the safety, it's just letting it out finally.
So women, for example, that have been storing this like chronic stress or trauma for a really long time, how will they typically present? What kind of things will they call you up and say to you?
A lot of anxiety. A lot of shame around the body. A lot of women store a lot of shame around sexuality, I find. They can't even enjoy like sexual interactions because they're just always constantly worried about what the other person is thinking about. And then I find that a lot of women, I believe I talked about this before, oscillate before either just always doing, like they have this and then they have to do this. And then
but specifically not for themselves, for
other people. Yeah. Just always
prioritizing other people. Yes.
Run around or can't really sit. Like I've recommended as homework to clients, like, okay, spend the day by yourself, go to the movies by yourself, go to the beach by yourself.
It feels so wrong though.
Yeah. And very uncomfortable.
Guilty and wrong.
And when you sit with yourself, you also have to start to feel everything or think about things that you've been, repressing is what I find. And then you have the women who also and then they're so in overdrive that then they just shut down and they will just lay in bed and sit on TikTok or whatever social media. Zone out.
We call that functional freeze typically. Like you might be able to get your day-to-day stuff done. You can go to your work and stuff like that, but you're not really finding engagement, enjoyment with it. Then as soon as you get home, you just like crash and you lay in bed or You're not motivated. You don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to do anything fun. So that's what like a freeze response will look like. Yep. So people that don't really fully understand those different states of the nervous system and how they present in them, I would love for them to understand that as much as possible so they know that these modalities are specifically very helpful for them.
Yeah.
And it's not just to wait till you get to rock bottom to do this stuff.
No, which is a lot of people come. They're like they're
in desperation mode.
Desperation, like, people who just start to pray when the plane is going down. I like to say I get some of those, which is fine. You show up when you're ready to show up. Also, there's a lot of depression as well, a lot of deep depression. And it's a lot of people that you would have no idea. Maybe, from the outside, their life looks perfect. They're living the perfect life.
Mm-hmm.
But inwardly, there's just so much anxiety, so much depression, inability to sleep, inability to turn the mind off. A lot of people are using sleeping aids, like Ambien type of things to sleep because
What about physical symptoms? Are
Yeah.
people like women specifically complaining about things like hormonal imbalances, gut issues? Like what kind of things?
Huge. So much autoimmune. So much autoimmune. And I believe in the mind-body connection. So anyone that comes to me, I ask, are you working out? How is your diet? Because, serotonin, the happy hormone, is made in the gut. So if you're not eating well, that's a really big starting point. Are you moving your body? Are you getting those endorphins going? That's also an energy release as well. So I'm a huge advocate for clean eating and exercise. But yeah, a lot of the women are just, oh, sorry, I got distracted. What was the question?
About women, how they present, like what kind of physical symptoms? So people might not attach the fact that energy work could be for them because they're like, oh, well, I'm fine. But like some of these physical symptoms are related to the fact that your nervous system is in a chronically dysregulated state because it's storing all energy that's not productive for it. Absolutely. And it needs to be released. So it's going to present in health issues.
So a lot of autoimmune, a lot of gut issues, a lot of insomnia. It's interesting, more with men than women, a lot of body aches and pains. So I will have somebody come to me for childhood trauma and they'll text me the next day and be like, my chronic back pain is gone because the body is storing the trauma. So of course there's the injury part of it, right? Everything all connects. So you could have been in a car accident when you were in the 5th grade and you hurt your wrist. And in the session, your wrist will actually start to hurt in the session, even though it hasn't hurt since you were 11 years old, but it's hurting because the body stores all of the trauma.
It wires that in there. I think so. Peter Levine, who you just mentioned before, and he's the who develops somatic experiencing, and he's amazing. He's one of the best
he's
trauma work
amazing
people out there, and he has an amazing book called Waking the Tiger, which if you're interested in going down the rabbit hole, that's a really good book to start with. He talks about when he's worked with clients, he'll bring up in their mind the story of what they went through when they were like 5 years old, and they'll start re-expressing it in their body. Like they'll start having like you said, the wrist pain. They'll feel the exact symptoms that they had that wired the trauma into their body. And then you start going through that and basically reprocessing it and help to work through it. And I know you, I've worked with you, so I've had pain come up in my body and you're like, just sit with it. And it releases. Truly is gone after.
Yep. But as it's coming up, it can be uncomfortable, but it's finally leaving the body. It's been stored for so long. So yeah, it can come up emotionally. It can come up physically. It can come up mentally. It can come up all of the above. But oftentimes I have people just afterwards, they're like, yeah, my back doesn't hurt anymore. I'm sleeping better. My insomnia is better. I'm able to be present. A lot of people find that their heart begins to open because all of a sudden they feel safe enough to connect with another human being, where before all of their relationships are really surface level because you can only meet a person where you are. So if you haven't met yourself yet, if you aren't able to sit with yourself and connect with yourself, how could you possibly connect deeply with another human being? So when we start to really connect with the body, with the nervous system, with our emotions, with our childhood or even our adult traumas, our entire world really begins to expand because we're finally meeting ourselves on a deep level, and then we can start to meet other people. So when I look back at relationships, especially romantic relationships that I had prior to my journey, I'm like, they were so surface level, but I wouldn't have understood that if you had said that to me at that level of consciousness 10 years ago, because I hadn't met myself yet. And it has a lot of highs and lows, this journey, because, you reach such high states of gratitude and expansion, but you also feel things so much deeper. But I wouldn't go back because it's like the entire world begins to expand and you really begin to start to live. You begin to thrive, where before you're just surviving, is what I would say.
Well, from looking at the perspective of an emotional scale, for example, if you can only allow yourself to feel a little bit of the bad feelings, you can also, on the other end of the spectrum, only feel the same level of good feelings. But if you go really, really deep and you basically sit in the shit of
And
it.
you sit in it. Yeah, that's what I tell
Excuse
you.
my language,
You gotta
but
sit in the
like,
shit.
yes, you now have expanded the other end of your spectrum of emotional scale. So you are going to start to be able, if you haven't felt joy, fun, flow, creativity, playfulness in years, it's also probably because you haven't allowed yourself to like go into the other end of the spectrum and like process all your yucky stuff too. And once you do that, you're going to start to access like way, way, way higher scales of the top end of the emotional scale. But you have to be okay with feeling both sides of it.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable while you're going through it, but it is absolutely worth it. And I actually find, especially for myself, that the more that you really connect with yourself and meet yourself, the more childlike you get. So the way that a child will just run up to someone on the playground and be like, hi, like, let's be friends, because they have no body armor. They're so open. They're so free. They're so themselves before, culture or whatever it is has ingrained beliefs into them, that they're able to connect so deeply and so openly with people. And so I find that in my everyday life that I can constantly make friends. I can go to the grocery store and meet someone because my energy is so open and so inviting, because I'm so connected to myself and to my inner child as well. But I went into some really, really dark places to be able to get here. So it wasn't just like, a couple of weeks of training. This has been a year's process of just going deeper and deeper into my guck, my shit, as we said. And I'm still on the process. It's just a never ending, like the onion peeling the layer back. You just go deeper and deeper. And so you could be sitting in the same room that you sat in 10 years ago, but it's a completely different world because your state of consciousness has shifted so greatly.
Yeah. Do you like to work with other practitioners to kind of blend together?
Yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll bring in some sound healers because musical instruments are not my forte. So they'll come in and I'll bring in the sound, because sound is vibration, frequency.
You do groups too.
I'll do groups, yeah, and you still get a nice taste. And sometimes what happens with the groups is that you pick up the energy of everybody around you. You don't absorb the energy of other people. People worry about that, but we can all amplify the quantum field together so that it can amplify what you are experiencing in the group. And then sometimes I'll bring in people that are very, very intuitive, and they'll be able to give feedback like, okay, the left shoulder pain stems from your mother's side, ancestral, or so forth. The privates go a little bit deeper. I think the groups, you still can get the energy. You can still go deep in it. But privates are a little bit, you feel more like a cocoon, a little safer. And with the privates, it includes like counseling and all of that. So we can really personalize it to you.
Yeah, I've done privates and I really enjoy that. But I also know in the world of trauma healing in other cultures, they are doing, they do it as a tribe. They do it as a group, a community. Because,
yeah, absolutely. It's a community.
So if you have the right group around you and you're the same mindset of the people, a group setting can be a really beneficial setting as well.
Absolutely. It's nice to have community and know that everyone is going through, maybe not the exact same thing you're going through, but you never know the battle that somebody's fighting inwardly, even if they're like, living in this big fancy house and everything in their life looks perfect. Everybody has something that they're going through. So it's nice for people to come together and realize that like you're not alone on this journey. We're all in this together, and we're all basically just kind of walking each other home.
So when somebody starts with you, and I know you're going to do this each individual session with people because everybody's dynamic and they're changing all of the time. Yes. Can you explain how you assess a person's energy and determine like where they're holding, where they're out of balance, Absolutely. Where they're like stagnant, that kind of stuff?
So we'll normally talk for about 20 to 30 minutes to begin. We'll go over what's going on in your life, what your goals are, what your needs are, if you're on any medication, if you have any injuries, right? We'll do a little bit of an assessment. Also, if you're a new client, it's important to, create rapport so that you're comfortable, because I want you to be comfortable throughout the session so that you feel safe with me. It's really important to have a safe container. And then a lot of it, I use my intuition. I can just feel into things. At this point, I've been doing the work for so long that when you begin to use that sixth sense all the time, it becomes just like, I know something smells like garlic, right? Or I know that the wall is black or whatever it is. But I also will use certain processes that I learned from Dr. Sarah, who is an amazing Australian chiropractor. She's an energy worker and a chiropractor. So I'll actually can look from either measuring your arm length or your leg length to see which side of the body that you're holding on to the tension and normally where you're storing it. So oftentimes if somebody hasn't told me that they have sexual trauma, I'll know because their sacral, I can tell that it's being stored in their sacral, which relates to sexuality. Or oftentimes I can tell someone's really, really in their head. They have a lot going on in their head, a lot of anxiety or ruminating. So I know that they're storing, that they have like some congestion, some blockages in their head. Oftentimes I know like somebody's root chakra, their root chakra is blocked or holding on to things because they don't feel safe in the world. So I'll use certain techniques that I learned from the chiropractor. And then I also mix intuition. So it's cool because it's mixing the Eastern and the Western philosophies, which I think is important to have both. So it's not so woo-woo. There's also some science-backed evidence to this as well.
Yeah. I mean, you have an incredible amount of hours of certification. So you're not just like making this up as
No,
you go.
I'm not making it up as I go.
You're a very highly trained professional. So for someone who is really curious about this or intrigued, they're not sure where to start, where would you say is the best place to start?
I always say come to a class, come to a group. They're not expensive. It's nice to come together. They're always under 15 people. You get a lot of attention. We all talk first, so everybody can come together. So this is a safe space. This is not judgmental. I always turn the lights off. Everyone has an eye mask. The music's pretty loud. So even though you're in a group, it's very much an inward cocoon energy. If people come with like a couple comes, I normally separate them because I want this to be your own experience. So I always say come to a group. Pull me aside afterwards, talk to me, and you'll see if the one-on-one resonates with you. Some people love the groups because they feel like they're in a community, they get community and they get other people who are also there with them. And I do have some clients that became, I love this. They became friends through the classes. And I have a lot of relationships with my clients because we really become close through the process because it's such a vulnerable experience. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, what's one last piece of advice or your biggest message, your biggest takeaway?
The highest vibration that you can have is actually authenticity. It's actually even higher than love. So the more you begin to pull these layers back and the more you really just become yourself, even if somebody's not going to like you or isn't going to agree with what you say, but you say it anyway because you're really truly being your authentic self, the more that your life starts to transform. So that's been the greatest takeaway from this work for me is that the more that I truly became like childlike Nicole, who's just walking around with like an open heart, sharing everything, the more I became authentic, the more my world, my business in all areas just really began to expand and transform. So authenticity, be yourself.
Authenticity. And this work that you're doing is a modality to help you get to your most authentic self.
Yep. Return you back to yourself before everything.
Be open-minded and explore the different modalities that are out there to help you become your most optimal version of yourself. And that's the biggest. That's the greatest thing you can do for yourself. So thank you so much. That was so informative. And I'm really excited for people to really understand more about the energy healing world. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I hope you can come back soon.